Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Blue Thunder Pod. I'm your host, Billy Sullivan. With me this week, my dad's favorite podcast host, if we're being honest, Aaron Winkler, Nee Sullivan, my sister.
Hi, everyone.
The first of our series of special guest hosts that I mentioned we're going to be doing for a few weeks last week. I suspect a few of the guest hosts will be returning multiple times. But I have I have like 3 or 4 lined up for you guys coming up. So you won't have to endure a solo pod of me doing like Scottish accents again anytime soon. So Erin, sister of mine,
yes.
younger sister of mine, middle child, the most middle child ever.
The biggest.
What is your history, or our history, with pro wrestling, with WWF, and then subsequently, what have you watched any up until this week? Or
have I? So way back in the Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage days.
Oh yeah,
that's where I started watching with you.
I gotta tell you, I found the
photo,
the card. I found the card, the actual card, Rosemont, that Dad brought us to, with Macho Man versus Hulk Hogan. It was crazy. Wrestling fans are fucking psychos.
So that's where I started, but kind of didn't really pay too much attention back then. Just kind of knew who they were. But then in the late 1990s, early 2000s,
when everybody
resurgence of wrestling, I participated in the weekly Raw and Nitro viewings that would happen.
Yeah. So I think we may have mentioned on the pod before, but if we hadn't, during that era, I and my friends were in our late teens, early 20s, and would meet at my parents' house to watch Raw every single Monday. So Aaron would often take part in that festivity. It was it was clockwork. We were there every single Monday watching Raw.
Yeah, God bless Mom and Dad for giving up the first floor of their house to us every single Monday, every week for years.
It's unbelievable. That's why Dad made me have to go to therapy every time I took a called third strike. Because every time I took a called third strike, I would have parents coming over and going, "Are you okay? Do we need to call someone?"
I didn't have that problem
because he didn't. Yeah, well, you're his favorite podcast host, and he hasn't even heard you yet. But yeah, no, he bottled all that. Like, oh, they're taking over my house. Billy got drunk when he was 15. He wrote fuck under the wallpaper. Never gave us crap about that. But then, like, nuclear meltdown if I took a third strike.
Spill a cup of milk and the roof was coming off the house.
Never lift a finger, like, to any of us. But I've never seen a man with such uncontrollable rage that is also very funny.
The cartoon, like, smoke out of the ears.
Yeah.
Level rage.
Now, remind me, I think I have this correct. I believe, because we all had our guy back in the Attitude Era days. I think Mick Foley was yours, if I remember correctly. You and I went to a Raw, I believe, and saw Mick perform.
We did, and I believe, wasn't it the Chris Jericho Raw that we went to?
Were you with... Well, like, me and Dave and Nick were at that Raw. Yeah, were you with us too?
I was there as well.
Because that's like, famously, a lot of people consider that the best debut in wrestling history. Yep. And Dave almost died because he flipped on the... I'm like... I've been trying to go back in my memory and figure out... Because I remember all the wrestling shows I went to, like, through that era back then. But I can't remember who was with me for what. Like... I know I saw Kurt Angle on a dark match before he had a character and he just had black trunks. I don't know who was with me.
I went to, I think, a couple of like local Chicago Raws with you. I did not go on like the big WrestleMania trip. That
it was Toronto. Yeah. That was Rock Hogan. Yeah. It was a big one.
But yes, Mick Foley was, I mean, I had a few favorites. I always thought my skill as a wrestling fan, because I didn't know all the technical ins and outs, was that I was pretty good at like picking somebody who was
You called Batista. You called Batista way before anybody else did. I've actually learned something from you in my wrestling acumen by recognizing charisma more. I mean, as I have grown older, as you guys know already, I grew up a WWF, WWE kid like everybody else, but as I've gotten older, my tastes have shifted to the show that is more directed towards adults, and my appreciation for and understanding of the ins and outs of the actual in-ring stuff is fucking through the roof now. It's like porno to me. I love it so much. But back then I was watching WWF, so it was more about the charisma and Batista doing those sly looks. You got it. They were trying to push Randy Orton to the moon. He was bored the shit out of me. Which amazing. 50-year-old Randy Orton now is my favorite Randy Orton ever. He's back. And Edge is in. I know you didn't see him this week, but Edge is in AEW now. Is Adam Copeland? I never liked Edge. I love him now.
I thought I saw him in a promo or commercial, and I thought maybe it was him, but I wasn't sure.
He's grizzled, Jack Reacher, dad movie guy, and it's just perfect. And also Christian is maybe my second favorite heel on AEW too. It's crazy what guys carried over, which guys. But anyway, I'm stepping on your toes. Middle Attitude Era, yes, we were going to shows together, and I mean nobody would be able to not have a fucking great time at those things, because the crowds were insane. Everybody, with the signs and the pictures and flashbulbs going off and stuff. When did you kind of peter out or stop? I mean, I'm sure it's not hard and fast, because I lived in the same house as you, and I was still watching not as ardently as I had during Attitude Era, but you knew who Carlito was, for example.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I would say probably I'd put myself around 2005 when I probably stopped at least watching sometimes. I probably wasn't watching religiously, but
that coincides with a couple things. The greatest sporting event in the history of all sporting events, the Chicago White Sox 2005 World Series Championship, and also that was when Vince was booking his shows, and particularly all of his women, in the rapiest vibes ever in the company history. So that was a time that a lot of people bailed. I actually bailed.
Yeah.
It's the only time in my life I bailed on wrestling was 05, 06. And then 06, 07, I got into Ring of Honor, which was a lot of the guys that are now in AEW and stuff. It was an indie thing. And that got me back into it. And now, obviously now I watch everything. But so what we had you do this week,
because 2005 was the last time.
As the last, yeah. So that is the end. That was the end. And it was all WWF E/E. You watched some Nitro early, but
we watched it because we were waiting for Raw.
Yeah. And in WCW, by that time was trying to be WWF, which is why it sucked ass, because prior to that, it was AEW, basically. It was the wrestling. You remember the Iflins? Ben and Chris Iflin?
I do remember
Hillbilly
them.
asses. I think they live in Utah now, because I looked up, tried to find them.
Yeah. That
they were my friends that were wrestling fans when I was 8 or whatever. And when I would go over to their house, and they would think that I was a total fucking poser because I was a Hulkamaniac, and they were all about Stinger and Hulk Hogan, fuck that guy, Terry Funk, Cactus Jack, goddammit. And you know what? They were right. But I was a kid, and WWE was aimed at kids.
And it was Hulkamania. Who wasn't wrapped up in Hulkamania?
Yeah, exactly. Did you ever see the deposition? Hulk Hogan's deposition, where he had to say out loud in court, I, Terry Bollea, do not in fact have a 9-inch penis. Hulk Hogan, the character, has a 9-inch penis, but not me.
Yeah, I'll have to YouTube that and check it out.
So that pretty big departure, I would say, from the the vibes of 2005 pro wrestling to what we have now. I mean, it's like a litany of things have happened to get to where we're at. And we'll touch on some of those today, not all of them, because I think it's pretty safe to say you'll probably come back on the show, and we can go through some of that more in depth, like how we got to where we got, stuff down the line. But like for you, watching Raw and Dynamite, which is what we had to do this week, what were your biggest takeaways? Like the biggest difference, the biggest similarity? Did it like, how did the shows feel like as opposed to one another for you?
So my biggest takeaway was that even 20 years lapsed, Raw feels exactly the same as it did the last time I watched it. It's like nothing changed. The clothes, I mean, I get that wrestling attire is pretty standard, but like even the non-wrestling attire they wore, the way that they talked,
the fucking cadence, the stupid scripted fucking promos.
It was so identical. It was like it could have been that I watched, a week ago, not 20 years ago.
It's the Performance Center. That's where they train their people, and they train them all to do the same thing.
Right. But as somebody who hasn't watched in 20 years, I will say that like I got a massive nostalgia hit watching it.
Oh, for sure.
Which, as much as Vince and his whole thing that he built, he's an awful person, but I get why they're kind of slow to move away from the Vince type of stuff because it was so nostalgic. I got a dopamine hit watching it.
It's a giant spectacle too.
And it was like I was 20 years younger. And I get why the fans still eat that stuff.
It is pretty good now too. Like even with their scripted promos, which like other wrestling companies don't do scripted promos, WWE still does. They have a few people that they allow, like Drew McIntyre, the guy that opened the show, the big Scottish motherfucker.
I had to make notes for myself so I'd know who everyone was, and my note on him was Scottish Steven Seagal.
And he's like, don't do Drew Jury. He's
just because he was the guy with the ponytail and Scottish accent, I needed to remember who he was.
He rules, and he's feuding with CM Punk, and both of those guys are allowed to like talk without written promos. And Kevin Owens is another one, but like. Yeah, that pacing. I do my best on this show to give WWE as much grace as I can, but until they change the pacing of the shows and stop doing shit like entrance music for wrestler come down, then cut to backstage segment while wrestler is still in ring, then go to commercial, then come back to other backstage segment. The whole time this dumbass wrestler is sitting like an asshole in the middle of the ring waiting for his opponent to come out. They've been doing that shit for
like the whole
forever.
SUV pulls into the stadium basement and wrestler gets. I was like, this is exactly like everything is exactly like it was 20 years ago.
Well, there is one like glaring huge difference that I think you had to have noticed because it's so starkly different than it was.
I did. It was the women's wrestling is night and day. Fucking
rules.
Different.
Like not just good, fucking rules. Like the women on both rosters are absolutely fantastic. And I never knew that because a piece of shit fucking Vince and his rapey ass bullshit having to put
models wrestle?
Having like wrestlers' wives that he thought were hot that he installed and made get breast implants.
Which
and then
I always
quote unquote wrestle matches. It was like 3 wrestlers, like Molly Holly, Gail Kim, that was pretty much it. Lita and Trish were they were not. I mean, they're trailblazers in a way, but they're like nowhere. They were nowhere fucking near what these ladies are doing now.
And I want to get her name right. Was it Zelina Vega?
Zelina Vega. She can't really wrestle, but she's one of the best talkers.
My favorite mic of the entire show.
She's one of the best talkers in the business. It's a bummer because she can't wrestle a lick. She's married to Malachi Black in AEW. There's so many crossover like marriages. But Zelina is awesome as like in a manager's role or in like shortened matches. But she talks like as well as like Punk. Yeah.
Oh, I mean,
she's incredible.
I only got a glimpse because I've only watched 1 week so far, but She was great on the mic. I actually wrote it in my notes because I was so shocked at how good, which was it's a huge departure from the women
there were none could talk.
No, not
because
at all.
Vince fucking didn't consider performers. He just wanted like big titties and he made me not know that women's wrestling was awesome because it was just awesome in Japan at the time and it was awesome in Mexico at the time. I thought like women's wrestling sucked because women's wrestling that I knew was like string bikinis and women that are clearly uncomfortable being like told to do sex stuff. Like now, even when they do seduction stuff, it's not like they're not uncomfortable doing it. It's like they have agency.
Right.
Then it just felt like they were being forced at gunpoint to.
Between both Raw and AEW or Dynamite, it was some of my favorite matches to watch were the women's matches, which I would have walked out of the room and gotten a snack for previously.
I think Willow Nightingale is like my third favorite wrestler on earth. And she's like a young up and coming female wrestler. She's awesome. She's like got Dusty Rhodes vibes. She's like bigger girl, just like super what they call white meat baby face, which is like just good guy, no coolness really. It's cool because she's so dorky, and she's an awesome wrestler. But like, yeah, she's like as good a wrestler as anybody going outside of like Will Ospreay and maybe MJF. But yeah, women's wrestling, man, of all the shit that I blame Vince McMahon for, that him making me believe that women couldn't wrestle as well as men for so many years, it's up there in my personal list of grievances. You want to go hop into Raw now, or do you want to talk a little bit more about? Do you have anything else on like what the WWE particularly, like what felt different or the same? I like just the pacing. I always say that pacing is always the same. Because Vince and Triple H, I don't know if you are aware, but Triple H is head of creative now. So he like writes everything.
Yeah,
He's all the booking.
I kind of knew that. I did think it was kind of funny that having my 20-year gap, there were wrestlers I had never seen before who were just cookie cutters of wrestlers I watched 20 years ago.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Even their names. Like Chad Gable was Kurt Angle.
100%.
Like,
yeah.
And, who's the other guy?
Chad Gable was an Olympian.
R-Truth was Booker T.
Well, R-Truth was around when you were watching.
I know.
R-Truth was like 55 years old.
I looked up a bunch of these guys
but yeah,
as I watched
he does the
them,
X kick. He does
It was so
he is
similar.
Booker.
And I was like,
he's 100% Booker T.
Super funny that they just kind of took those characters that worked, I guess, with fans and just did version 2.0 with them.
That's kind of pro wrestling. Yeah. Everybody steals a little bit from one another. The Gable and Angle thing is like it's really on the nose. It was intentional. Like he's a. They did a weird thing with him this week. I don't know what the hell they did this week. They had a really good story going where Chad Gable like ran. He was like the trainer, mentor, but like abusive mentor for Otis, who's like an awesome big guy, and Maxine Dupree is like a very, very green, only has like 11 matches literally in real life wrestler, and Akira Tozawa, who's like a jobber. And he browbeaten them, and finally they were like, it came to a head, and Otis turned on him. It was like dramatic. It was very well done. And then like at the end of last week's episode, they had like the Wyatt Six. Well, I'll explain that to you.
Slipknot?
Yeah, Slipknot basically. But there's a good reason for it, and I do like them, even though I don't like spooky bullshit in wrestling. Undertaker shooting fucking... I do believe you are in line with the Blue Thunder Pod's company line of The Undertaker fucking sucks balls no matter what anybody says.
Awful. Well, I kind of am. I've always been kind of biased against the big guy wrestlers. I don't love watching them wrestle. I get that there is a level of skill that you have to be that big and wrestle, and there's athleticism. But to me, they're just always pretty boring. I liked
get you on some
Kane, but
AEW big guys like Big Bill. Not boring.
Yeah, well, I just dipped my toes into AEW.
Yeah,
so
and this was like
there.
It was a bad AEW for me to launch you off on, because they're, as we've talked about on the pod before, like they kind of put their best foot forward on the penultimate show before a pay-per-view, and then the go home show is always kind of like just catching up bullshit. So you didn't get to see a great Dynamite, but it's still like enough flavor. But you didn't get to see any like the big guys there wrestle.
Yeah,
it's a world.
No, but to your point, Undertaker sucks. And
he fucking sucks. Everything
creeped me out so bad when I was a kid that I never really.
Now he's got a piece of shit podcast where it's like #1 podcast in all of wrestling because he's the Undertaker and he's famous, and he just goes on there and talks about how like all the young wrestlers today are pussies because they don't like shit in each other's gym bags and like rib each other, make each other like drink candles of Jack Daniels. They just want to play video games and like because they want to like live a happier, more like comfortable life. They don't want to die of pain pill overdoses like everybody else. And that's all he went from shitty wrestler who's just a gimmick to shitty podcaster who's just an old crotchety prick, and he continues to fall upwards. Makes me fucking crazy. Remember Big Evil Red Devil when he came out on a stupid motorcycle?
I don't know.
Dead man walking. It was like tail end of Attitude Era when he came back as Biker Taker. He wasn't even like
I probably was kind of falling off at that point.
It's the only time he wasn't like a wizard, like a space wizard, undead guy. We just covered a Turnbuckle Time Machine. In canon, The Undertaker murders Paul Bearer eventually. And still that case is open. I don't know. It was like filmed. I don't know why he has not been arrested yet. But like, he sucks. Big Evil Red Devil sucks. What about, and like, don't worry about pregnant pauses, by the way. I go through it, because sometimes I'm just thinking.
Oh, also, the wrestler names, and I'm sorry, WWE. I was like, come on,
fucking, they can't get away from Vince with that.
Braun Breaker. With
Do you know what? You know what? You know what extra sucks about Braun Breaker? You know what his real name is? Fucking Rick Steiner. He's Rick Steiner's son. He's Big Papa Pump's nephew. Oh, and they named him Braun Breaker. He's awesome. Like, and they gave him the stupidest ass, like Nintendo kind of ass fucking Super Smash Brothers bullshit name. But
yeah, the names, I noticed that was a pretty big difference between watching.
I mean, they made Bryan Danielson, who's like maybe the best wrestler to ever live. They made him change his name to Daniel Bryan because they're fucking stupid. It's the lowest common denominator. That show is made for children and guys with like light effects under their sports cars. That's their target demo, which is why they get 3 million people watching every week and Dynamite gets 600,000. I will say, did you notice anything about the production, like the actual television side of things?
Not that I noticed as far as like a difference between now and then. No, because it's been so long. I probably.
Well, you know what? Now that I think about it, like it got bad after you kind of stopped watching. Kevin Dunn was like, and he's probably. He's included in the lawsuit, by the way. He's a piece of shit. He like has been the producer for WWE television for forever, and like in the mid 2000s, he really like got all the power to do whatever he wanted, and he would do these just cut on every move. Every time there was impact, he thought, well, we can't show the impact because people are going to not buy it, so we'll cut on it. Like, no, if you get talented wrestlers, they can make it look real.
Right.
But he would cut. So Kevin Dunn left the company like, I don't know, 4 months ago. And now they're doing fucking oneers. They followed like Liv Morgan from the back. That's a thing they do every episode now. They do flyover shots. Logan Paul's got them doing drone. Are you aware that Logan Paul is a very good professional wrestler?
I wasn't aware of that. I did know he was like sort of involved. They even showed him
he's the U.S. champion
on an iPhone at one point.
He's like a goddamn phenom. It makes me crazy because he's Logan Paul. At least it's not Jake Paul, but like he's Logan Paul, and he's so good at everything. He's like the best Mike because he's a heel, natural heel.
Right. I mean,
he can do all the moves.
He's a wrestling character athlete in life, so I guess it makes sense.
Yeah. So that it still aggravates me that he's a fucking phenom. But he is fun to watch. But like he has brought a lot of TV production stuff, and they've scaled down all the like crazy lights and LED boards all over the place. And I am enjoying the show more now under Triple H and the new like TV production crew than I have in like 30 years or whatever.
Yeah,
I don't like it very much.
I'm guessing I was kind of away from it when all of the bigger changes were happening because I didn't notice anything hugely different.
Like Attitude Era, that was paced. The shows were paced real great, and Raw was 2 hours.
Yeah.
3 hours now. It's but yeah, like the slow ass pacing stuff started like in that mid 2000s.
Yeah,
and they're just finally getting out of it, kind of now. So to get into the actual meat of Raw, we'll talk about Raw first, since that is the thing that you were more familiar with. By the way, AEW's got like 4 guys that are very Mick Foley adjacent.
Right. Well, when we get to AEW, I'll give you my thoughts on that stuff too.
Do you know? Oh, by the way, you kind of lucked out because Pat McAfee is usually the color guy. And his ridiculous Pittsburgh accent, I'm sorry to all our Pittsburgh listeners, fucking makes me crazy. His stupid jock jokes are grating. I have to tune him out. But he like was on assignment or something. But then they just put The Miz.
Right.
The Miz, who I was going to mention it later when he had his match, but I may as well say it now. So The Miz has been wrestling for 20 years now.
Right.
He has yet to have a good wrestling match.
Oh.
Like, we looked it up. He hasn't had a good wrestling match.
Well, the interesting thing was, I think I kind of was not really watching anymore by the time he actually made it into wrestling. I believe he was on I know he was on The Real World. That's where I know him from.
He was
he was on the wrestling reality show, the competition show. And that's kind of where I left him. So to see him on Raw was pretty funny to me.
He has not improved in the ring.
The Miz.
At all. He's great at talking. Like, he's charismatic. He's hosted game shows and stuff. He did real well on Dancing with the Stars, whatever. Like, he has not improved.
Right. Well, I think that's what
at all in the ring. I don't know how that's fucking possible. He was wrestling consistently for 20 years. Like, anybody should get pretty good, and he just no improvement. And he's a guy that obviously puts like work in other stuff because he can act now, and he pays attention to all his other stuff. He just fucking sucks so bad.
Well, I enjoyed him at the. I mean, I didn't know who the announce team really even is anymore. Actually, when I saw Michael Cole, I was like, "Whoa, Michael Cole! He's way older now than I remember him."
Been there. We just did a Turnbuckle Time Machine, which was Michael Cole's first ever show. SummerSlam '97. So that's how long he's been.
Yeah, so when I saw him, Michael Cole and The Miz, I thought The Miz was just part of the announce team, and he did a decent enough job. I preferred the Dynamite announce crew for sure, but I didn't. No, there was nothing. There was nothing I disliked necessarily about the Raw announce team. I mean, like, I watched, in like the JR.
Yeah.
King days where everything was like so over the top.
I mean, JR's the GOAT, so like he's the best of all time. I mean, he does like one-off matches for AEW, like a big match on a pay-per-view, or if there's a big like main event for Dynamite or whatever, he'll come on and he's still very good, but he can only do that because he's old and like
But like I'm saying, the announced stuff was very memorable back in the old days, and so this was like good. It was okay. I
agree.
Okay.
Like the AEW stuff is way more memorable, mostly because of Taz's fucking ridiculous jokes and Gambag City and I get Suplex Jones over here and like but the thing about Michael Cole that is the biggest difference that's noticeable to me, because I've been watching this shit for like nonstop. I don't know if you were aware of this, but when Vince McMahon used to actually do color commentary or play-by-play. He was dog shit at it, but he's a megalomaniac, so he thought he was good. When he left that, what he did then was, like every show, he would sit in what they call gorilla position, which is like right before you come out through the curtains, producing the show from there. And he would make Jim Ross and Michael Cole and whoever else is on the broadcast team have an earpiece, and he would just be constantly screaming shit into their ear for them to say. That's
very on brand for Vince McMahon, from what I know.
I have so much respect for Michael Cole. Like, how the fuck do you not have a panic attack and quit the first time that happens, let alone every week for like 20 years.
Maybe it's like when you've got kids and you learn how to just tune out what's happening in the background.
I don't think you can tune out, pal.
Yeah.
It's Kennedy McMahon, pal. If like, you tried to tune him out, he would like pull his dick out at you.
That's
like
true too.
Lyndon Johnson or something like. But like Michael Cole, he's still bad. But as soon as the earpiece came out, he got like way better.
Yeah.
He like sounded like he was enjoying himself. He still doesn't know any fucking moves, which is amazing to me after 30 years.
The amount, if you're like a semi-normal human being, the amount of tension that must have existed at all times when Vince was involved, it just had to be like, I don't know how anybody.
The thought of the man makes me uncomfortable. Right. Like before the like rape stuff was public knowledge. I mean, people in the know knew he was up to some fucking shitty shit, but like his presence before that would make me like, oh man, like you don't have a good vibe at all. And the way he booked his shows too, like making women in string bikinis eat dog food and
some
shit.
Of the stuff and that happened back in the height. I think back now and I'm like, did we actually watch that stuff on TV? And we were like young-ish.
You know what's weird?
People much younger
like
than us.
04, 05 got way worse than the Attitude Era. You think Attitude Era would be like the most ridiculous, but it was really like China and like Sable was the one, like, you know, the hot chick, the model type. That was just the Mark Marrow's wife that Vince stole and like put on TV. But like China was like legit. She was like a legit enforcer. No women wrestlers in WWF really at that point, but like China was a legit thing. When they moved into like 05 and Tori Wilson, and it was just fitness models that looked like they were like looking warily around at all the men and the rape vibes that were like coming at them nonstop in that era. And that's like completely gone. It is like, so what happened was there were 4 women, the 4 horsewomen as they are called, Sasha Banks, Bayley, and that picture right there is Sasha Banks and Bayley, my favorite women's match of all time. Charlotte Flair, so it's Rick's daughter. She
got her mother's looks.
Well, she looks kind of like a dude, but she's huge. She's like 6'2" or something.
Oh,
wow. And Becky Lynch, who may have just retired or at least going on hiatus. They kind of like broke the mold for WWE wrestling, at least, showed that like women can wrestle like hard hitting, awesome matches. And then the floodgates open.
How long ago was that it kind of started?
So like it started in NXT, which is like the WWE developmental show. Like that match, that Bayley Sasha Banks match, was an NXT takeover Brooklyn. I think that happened in like 2016, 2017.
Okay.
Took a few more years for WWE to catch up because Vince didn't pay attention to NXT, and he obviously has no respect for women whatsoever.
You don't say.
So it took a while, but like there was always good women's wrestling in North America. I just didn't know about it because all I watched was fucking Vince's bullshit. But it was, it was fun. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it was fun. And like in the heyday of Stone Cold and The Rock, I try to be as honest on this pod as I can about it. Like, I hate the pacing. I hate the way they book the shows. I think everything takes too long in WWE. I hate the way they wrestle their matches. But I actually think the show is pretty entertaining right now.
It is. Like I said, it was like watching it again was like a dopamine hit of nostalgia because it was like, I remembered how fun it was. I texted you and I said, I miss watching this live with you because it was like such a fun, entertaining feeling that I had, even if I didn't really know what was going on.
Pro wrestling is the greatest art form on earth. And like, I say that with no joke, like no irony, nothing whatsoever. I have a t-shirt that says, wrestling is better than the things that you like. And I really believe it because it rules. It's got everything. It's
fun to watch, even without having recent context at all, you can just hop right back into it like I did. And it was super entertaining, and it flew by, and I enjoyed watching it this week, and I'm probably going to keep watching it. And, I've got 2 boys who have never really gotten into wrestling, and then maybe they will now because...
Then I'm going to have to try to push them towards AEW so they could be the educated, the sicko fans.
One of them did go to an AEW live show with a friend of his, but that was his only time he's ever seen it, and he enjoyed it.
I saw MJF versus CM Punk live. I mentioned that on every podcast. This Raw, and you said it flew by, like, that is a great sign, because usually the one thing that like almost always happens with Raw is it's 3 hours, and with a zillion commercials, at least until they go to Netflix at the end of the year, it feels like it goes on forever.
Well, I was also a special case because I was watching it and trying to figure out who everyone was, and Wikipedia-ing people because they looked familiar to me, like they could have been somebody's kid or something, and so I was trying to inform myself about some stuff while I was watching it.
So we'll start rolling down what happened throughout the show. I'm not, not going to do a bunch of in-depth stuff because I just kind of want to ask you what your take is, and then fill you in on what things are like. I want to see how close it is to what they're doing, or how it comes across. Because I am super curious as to somebody jumping in. Even if it was somebody who jumping in, never watched before at all, can you jump in and understand what's happening on a Raw or a Dynamite? Were you able to follow the?
Yeah, I mean, they do a pretty good job of recapping, whether it's the announced teams that kind of recap it or they even show.
Well, WWE does
the recaps,
video packages every 3 seconds.
So I kind of got the gist. I mean, the general gist of professional wrestling is always the same anyway. So, it's easy enough to kind of figure out what's going on. And like I said, the people I didn't know, I was Googling them and, kind of getting an idea of who was doing what and stuff. So even though I hadn't watched up until this week, I think I got a pretty good idea of, what the current plot lines and things are.
So so that answers my question. It is jump-inable.
It is, definitely.
Because I've been ardent wrestling fan for 40 years, so I have no idea.
I think it has to be in order to get young fans, because it would be, kids wouldn't want to start watching it if it was too much. You've got all of these storylines, so you would think, oh my gosh, this is so difficult to keep track of, but it's really the same basic plot points, so it's
most
easy
of it,
to just pick your favorites and, just whether it's because of their personalities or their skills in the ring, and just go with it and see, what happens with their stories.
As long as Special Needs Jey Uso is a part of the roster, the kids are going to be a fan of WWE. Did you see, was he on Raw? I think he's a SmackDown performer.
No, he was not.
He's very amusing. We'll have to do some Jey Uso stuff.
Like I said, I think I'm gonna, at least for the foreseeable future, I'm gonna kind of stay in the loop on this and keep watching, because
sweet. Then we will have you back on the pod if you are willing to come, because I would like to see the progression of what.
It was genuinely fun because I already have some very minor opinions of people, so I kind of want to see them again and see if my initial reactions to them hold true.
Well, if you become a wrestling fan, you're not allowed to have minor opinions. They have to be the hottest takes of all time.
Right.
Don't ever say you're a wrestling fan in front of other wrestling fans, because there's the gatekeeperiest motherfuckers on earth. If you say I'm a wrestling fan around another wrestling fan, they will say, prove it, name every wrestler, literally name every wrestler. It's the worst. Just
well, you're really selling it.
Stick to the podcast, talking to me where we're nice. So the show opened with Drew McIntyre, like you said, Scottish Steven Seagal.
No offense. Please, Drew McIntyre, don't take offense to that. It was just the ponytail, and I needed a way to remember who was who.
He rules. He was a guy that was a young prospect and kind of failed, then went away, did the indies for a bunch of years, remade himself, came back, and he's been awesome. And it's the best thing going right now is him and CM Punk are feuding. And that's what the start of this show is in reference to, is Punk. So they just had a PLE, that's a pay-per-view. They're premium live events is what they call them now in WWE. I fucking hate that too. And I hate this schmaltzy, then, now, forever, together. Like, shut the fuck up. You were probably in the room when Vince was shitting in people's mouths. Triple H. But they had a pay-per-view in Glasgow, Scotland. The first ever in Scotland. Drew McIntyre going for the one of the 2 world titles, because they have 2 world titles because it's stupid. And CM Punk like dressed up as a ref and screwed him out of it. So like
I was a little disappointed to not see any CM Punk, because even though I've been away from wrestling these years, I know who he is because I'm from the Chicago area, and that's just one of the people that you knew around here. So, are
you familiar with any of the AEW CM Punk stuff?
I think you would periodically fill me in a little bit, but I don't really know.
The conclusion that Dave and I kind of came to was it was just like it was great for AEW at the time because it got a big boost, and like we all love CM Punk. He's a total piece of shit in real life. Like he absolutely would be the most hard to get along with guy ever, but he's awesome he's a wrestling genius. It's like his mind for the business is second to none. His MJF feud was amazing, but like the problem was that his idea for how a wrestling show should be booked or written is the WWE style. So they tried, like Tony Khan, who's like the nerd who owns AEW and like loves CM Punk. He would listen to everything he said. So like throughout 2023, they were trying to make it more like WWE, which made it worse and worse.
Right. I remember you telling me that you were like kind of sad about what was happening with.
And then Punk got in a fight with a bunch of people, but like the second fight got him fired. And then Tony Khan went right back to like, okay, we're making this for the sickos again. And we're kind of in that zone now. We're like, they're gaining the trust back of people because like 2023 kind of fucking sucked. The pay-per-views AEW pay-per-views are always amazing. Like the worst AEW pay-per-view is better than any other pay-per-view from any other company I've ever seen. Like the worst one. It's astounding how consistent they are with pay-per-views.
So really what you're telling me is that this is the perfect time to reignite my wrestling passion because AEW is improving upon the 2023 era. And Vince McMahon is no longer part of WWE, and maybe they'll start moving away from some of that Vince stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they have slowly but surely been moving away from Vince stuff. Like they say,
fingerprints on
he's
it.
Gonna for a while because he was there. He was the guy forever. I don't necessarily buy that. I think a lot of this shit that he thought worked just worked because it was the only thing in town, so it was the only thing that people knew.
Right, but like I said, it's a nostalgia-y thing. So I think that's why a lot of fans buy into it because they know what they're getting. People don't like change.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
So it's like
I like to give the credit to the workers, like the wrestlers.
Comfort show.
I don't ever want to give Vince McMahon credit for anything,
right?
Because he doesn't. He hated wrestling.
No.
He hated me because I'm a wrestling fan, and he thought I was a dork for being a wrestling fan. He wouldn't let you say wrestling on the show.
Trust me, I have zero love for Vince McMahon, but I get.
I can't imagine
why it's difficult for them to kind of pull away from that, or at least it's going to be a slow process.
Yeah, the cadence, the promo thing. That makes me fucking lose my mind, and I have to fast forward a lot of that stuff. But like that, so the Drew segment, what was your take on him like talking? Because he was kind of subdued here.
I couldn't really tell. I didn't know if I was gonna like him or not like him, being someone who didn't know him. The stuff he said was interesting. It made me like kind of interested in what's going to happen with that storyline. Also. The name Larry for a dog, totally underrated dog name.
Kenny Omega saved Larry in the fight that CM Punk got in AEW.
And that might be why I was kind of interested because they were talking about Larry the dog, and that made me a little like, oh, yeah. There's an emotional aspect to this.
It's the most interesting thing. Punk is still technically injured. He's not cleared to wrestle yet, so he doesn't go to he should be going to every goddamn Raw because talking is good enough for CM Punk. But like Drew is one of the best talkers too in the company. But I was wondering if you recognize that because like this week he was really like kind of subdued and very serious. He's actually able to do the Barbs thing like back and forth.
I think it's because he wasn't really playing off. He was just out there monologuing.
Because he's like super fucking pissed because he got his title stolen from him in front of his hometown. Like the first time that the company's ever gone to his country.
And I will say I was kind of I was interested in seeing that across both companies. I felt like there were a lot more like European wrestlers.
Way more. And that is one of the like, I mean, AEW just got wrestlers from everywhere.
Right.
But the European wrestlers not necessarily having to be evil villain. We hate America too. Like that's one of the nice Vince is gone things.
Yeah.
Like Ilya Dragunov. I love him so much. He's a Russian guy and he dresses so snappy that he looks like he smells nice. I told Dave, I think I'm moving more towards the center of the sexual spectrum because of Ilya Dragunov. He does a thing where when he puts a waist lock on somebody and he's doing German suplexes, the whole time he's doing it, and I love people that talk in the ring when they're wrestling, he goes, I got you. You're going nowhere. I got you.
Well, now I definitely have to watch
And he's a good guy. He's like, he just had an awesome match with Braun Breaker, stupid name. But yeah, it doesn't have to necessarily be like villain because you're from another country. Like Gunther, who we saw like a little bit later on the show, he's probably their best wrestler in the whole company, and he's a bad guy, but he's not a bad guy because he's Austrian. He's just a bad guy because he was like super dominant, awesome, never lost, would do whatever it took to win. Like he did never shit talked America or like that. That shit that Vince used to do nonstop.
Yeah, I noticed that there was like a little bit of the stereotype stuff, but it wasn't the way that it used to be.
It still exists in WWE, but in very small doses. It does not exist in AEW or anywhere else really these days.
Yeah.
But again, it's an abusive relationship WWE's been. It's going to take a while to get out of it. So. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about was the Wyatt Six. Are you familiar with how that came to be, what it actually is, what it symbolizes, and like the what the plans had been prior to a thing happening?
No, I did a little bit of researching, and I think I'd seen that somebody had passed away unexpectedly.
Bray Wyatt, who like very, very beloved wrestler, I myself included, he was only average in the ring, but he was such a brilliant, like he did a Max Cady character for a while where he had like he was a cult leader in a swamp, and it was a great promo. And then he did like a character where he was an evil Mr. Rogers. So like they would do these like little snippets on Raw and SmackDown of Bray like in a sweater and his hair pulled back and talking like Mr. Rogers. And there would always be one little weird off thing to make you unsettled. And then when he finally wrestled, it was in like the scariest fucking demon mask ever. He was a very, very creative person.
Okay.
Like he's worked on comic books and stuff. A universally beloved guy amongst the wrestlers too. He had a brother, Bo Dallas, who was in WWE. They winded up letting him go. I thought that was a mistake way back when, but the latest thing that Bray Wyatt had been doing was a thing called Uncle Howdy, where he was taking his orders from this dude in a mask and a top hat, and that had just kind of started. And then Bray unfortunately passed away of like really weird, not drugs, not like, it was just like a heart
attack,
like a congenital thing. And he was in his early 30s.
Right. I think, yeah, when I looked it up, 34 or something.
Was so fucking sad because he just had a like amazing comeback. His like entrance and stuff was so awesome. So then rumors started going around that like that they were going to still form the group, but with Bo Dallas now, because like they were super close too. They always wanted to just wrestle together. There was like both of their dream. They talked about it for a million years. And Bo Dallas, good guy too. He was under the Uncle Howdy mask when Bray was doing that, like when they started that thing right before he passed. For the last several months, there have been things like glitches and QR codes and stuff popping up, and you can follow the rabbit hole.
Raw thing.
And like so what it ended up being was a bunch of people, and with Bo Dallas at the front as Uncle Howdy, a bunch of people that Bray had like worked with in stables and stuff before. Like Eric Redbeard is the guy that has the big hammer now, and like Nikki Cross, he worked with her for a while. Speaking of Scottish wrestlers, it's just, and the reason it's the Wyatt 6, even though there's 5, is twofold. It's because Bray is the other thing,
right?
And it's actually the Wyatt SICKS, which I thought was pretty neat. I hate ghost bullshit in wrestling.
Well,
but they seem more like Rob Zombie.
They do.
Crazies.
They are it was very Rob Zombie.
I can get into.
The part that made me laugh was, again, I haven't watched in 20 years, and then like the girl from The Ring, the movie The Ring, comes into the ring, and then hands Michael Cole a VHS tape, and I was like, "Is this 20 years ago?" Because that's what it felt like with those references. But I didn't really know what was going on with it yet at that point.
They just debuted like last week.
Oh, okay.
And that's what one of the weird things about this show. Like the way they debuted was like they did a big like a oneer camera shot going through the whole back like stage area, showing all of the characters in the Wyatt 6, and like all the wrestlers were decimated, and Chad Gable looked like he had a bullet in his head. And then this week he was back fine. I don't know what was going on there. But like that's how they were introduced. So they're new to me too. Like,
okay.
It's all brand new. I mean, I know all the wrestlers, but the gimmicks for them, it's new. And I really hope they stick to like the crazies, because ghosty bullshit. Nothing takes me out. Nothing takes me out of a wrestling show more than ghosty bullshit.
That's where you draw the line in the believability.
I like because like I like my AEW, I like my Ring of Honor, my New Japan, where like the fighting is simulated fighting. It looks like they're hitting each other,
right?
And if you're doing that, and then a guy can disappear in a puff of smoke, right. I'm like, I don't believe your super kick anymore. Like, so I hope they stick to like the crazy element. But I was super impressed. Bo Dallas. Did you see the Bo Dallas, like the little interview with himself thing he did? We were talking about Bray Wyatt. That must have taken so much.
Well, that's why I looked it up, because I was like, is this like legit? Because I didn't know anything.
And it's fairly recent.
And when he talked about his brother passing, I was like, is this like a fake storyline, or is this like a real thing? So that's when I looked him up and kind of saw who they were, and then that's how I knew that he had passed away. Super sad. Yeah. Yeah, my next note was like, why is Chad Gable fine? Like he was looking like he was shot in the head. I think he did have a little Band-Aid on his forehead. Yeah,
exactly. After it looked like at least like a 20 caliber bullet that entered his skull. Great minds think alike, by the way. My note, Braun Breaker, dumb name, but he's awesome.
My note says early 2000s Aaron would have been super annoyed with him. Because that was my takeaway watching him.
He is like... he's awesome in the ring. He's got he does literally run the ropes harder than anybody like in WWE. He's really good at the power stuff.
Yeah. But I was annoyed with his dad too. I was.
I think he's better than both his uncle and his dad.
But back in the day, I was like, yeah, on them too. So.
But Braun, when he was in NXT, because he was a recent call up, he had progressed past this like monster tough guy thing to where like he got to show his personality, the Batista of it all. He formed a tag team with a notoriously crotchety heel bad guy, Baron Corbin, and Braun was like a little giddy puppy, and he loved them so much he named their team the Wolf Dogs.
Oh, that's funny.
And he got them Wolf Dogs like. But then when they brought him up to the main roster, they got rid of all that and they made him a monster again. So he's kind of boring again. But like in the ring, he's one of their better guys. He does hit pretty hard.
He just maybe it was the name alone that was making me kind of cringe and be like, this guy's.
And I don't think he's like transphobic like his dad. If you ever heard about those stories, but like multiple WrestleCons, Rick Steiner intentionally loudly talking about trans people, like in a negative way.
Yeah, I mean, I'd buy that.
First AEW Women's Champion of all time, trans woman.
Oh.
Yep. Yeah, I like the company for more than one reason.
We've discussed that before.
All right, well, we talked about the do an entrance, backstage bullshit, and like whatever, like people having to sit in the ring waiting for. The other thing that has not changed, and I'm not going to call you out on it because it'd be a weird thing to like, what else has not changed? WWE does not do clean finishes. They don't do just winners and losers. And that's something that AEW only does.
Right.
AEW literally will allow themselves one disqualification match a year. You happen to see it. They're one a year. But like every televised match in WWE has some kind of a schmaz, cheat. It's a no contest, whatever. And like that's Vincey bullshit too. That's been going on since like just after the Attitude Era. What was your take on the Judgment Day? And are you aware of Rhea Ripley?
No, I'm not.
So Rhea Ripley is the most popular female wrestler in WWE. She is currently out with a separated shoulder. That was an accident, but Liv Morgan, the blonde girl, the seductress, she's the one that did it. It was an accident, but they tied it into the story. Well, Rhea Ripley, her like sub, actually, it was her sub, Dominic Mysterio. she was the dom, he was the sub, and like that was the whole thing. He called her mommy, like that they had that dynamic. And when Rhea got hurt, Liv has kind of infiltrated the Judgment Day, which is their group.
Okay.
And trying to take Dom away.
That was the Liv stuff was the one thing that I couldn't quite get a handle on story-wise. What was really going on with everybody kind of involved in her. And
this was the weakest week for her, not because of her, but because they just made a decision that was bad taste with the nude selfie insinuation, just because Vince was doing that to all three people. Like Liv has been awesome. Like playing this role, flirting in a way that you see people flirt in real life, not like wrestling.
I actually enjoyed her on the mic as well.
She's great.
I liked Zelina better, but I did like her on the mic.
Yeah, Zelina is like one of the best of all time. But Liv is like, she's excellent. And she's seducing Dom, and now she's calling him Daddy Dom. Do you know who Dom's dad is, by the way?
I do, and I felt really bad about myself because when he came out and I looked at him and went, oh my God, how old is he? And then I looked him up and I was like, he's not that much older than I am. So really, I'm the old one in the equation. But
Ray? You're talking
Ray
about?
Mysterio.
I think he's
like mid 40s.
Yeah. Which is insane for doing lucha libre stuff.
But I just assumed he's been around forever, and so I was like, and Dom looks like old enough. And I was thinking
I think Ray had his first match when he was 15.
Yeah, and I was thinking like, oh, he's got to be old if he's got a son. But then I realized like, oh wait, I could have a son.
Dom did not inherit the wrestling gene from his dad. He got all the other stuff. He's able to get booze and.
He kind of has an Eddie Guerrero look going on.
What's hilarious is way back when there was a angle they did when Dom was a little kid about a paternity thing. Is it Eddie Guerrero or Rey Mysterio's son? And now he looks exactly like Eddie Guerrero.
He looks exactly like him. I actually looked it up to make sure it wasn't just a plot that Rey was his dad and he was using a different name, and maybe he was Eddie Guerrero's kid. I didn't know, but that was my assumption.
I kind of think it might be the case.
It could be.
But so Liv, really what I think is happening is Liv and Finn Balor, who's another member of the Judgment Day, are kind of conspiring together. Finn has been pretending to be still with the Judgment Day on their side, but I think they're going to work together to try to tear it apart. She's calling him Daddy Dom now. It was a great line. She's like, oh, you deserve a woman that respects you enough to call you daddy, because he always called her mommy. Rhea Ripley, and Rhea's like a total ass kicker. She looks like the lead singer from Social Distortion. She's awesome.
I wanted to ask, because I couldn't tell from my watching it, what was the crowd saying when when Dom Mysterio was talking?
So
just boos, or was it
just
something
boo?
else? Okay.
Yeah, like that's kind of his thing. People boo so loud that they drown him out because he's like his. So how he got over is he's like an insufferable little fucking waste of space, but he then was such an insufferable little waste of space that like it got over. People were like boo. Now they kind of pump in some of the boos. Like Don Callis in AEW, I think is more real, his big boos. But they do, people still do very much get into the not letting him talk by doing the boo. And that's kind of a callback to Vicky Guerrero too, because she used to. You ever see her? Excuse me, Eddie's wife. That started doing TV stuff more after Eddie passed, but like she was a great heel back in the day. But yeah, I think she's just. I don't think Liv is actually trying to seduce Dirty Dom as much as trick him and then turn all of them against each other and because Rio was the champ.
Never happen.
No, absolutely not. And nobody would notice the stuff happening week to week because it was like very obviously happening. They shouldn't have done the sex though. Lyra Valkyria, speaking of women wrestlers, is a goddamn phenom. She's like 23 years old. She was the next match was her and Kairi Sane, I think.
Yeah.
And it was just another like absolute banger of a match, as good as any men's match.
That's what made me write my note that like women's wrestling had changed so much because it was.
And like Lyra's an extra special. She just came up from NXT a month ago, and she's like one of the 2 or 3 best women wrestlers on their roster. I love watching her wrestle.
Well, when they
she's
all
super
came
awesome.
out and like just their physiques, I was like, oh, this is different. This is
then their titties are not hanging out.
Right.
Like they're dressed like they're fighting.
Dressed like they're ready to wrestle, and like they were. I mean, not that back in the old days the model wrestlers they were all in great shape.
Yeah. Well, and like, sexiness is a part of wrestling. It always should be a part of wrestling for both men and women. And it's like dudes with like greased up abs.
Right.
Like that's sexy. There are women that still do this like the sexy vibe. The difference is they can actually wrestle now too. And then most of the roster is just wrestlers. It's just people, just women that have dedicated their lives to their craft and are awesome.
I mean, and it was super apparent on my first viewing that it's so different now and that they are such great athletes. And that is something that is hugely different than what I remember.
Yeah. Yeah. Sami Zayn. Do you know who he is? He was the guy with the red beard.
Note. Oh, he Intercontinental Champ.
One of my favorite guys.
Okay.
He was El Generico. He was a tag team partner with the announcer from AEW in Ring of Honor for a long time. But he was one of the first guys to kind of break through, like from the independent scene, doing the more flippy stuff to get through, and he's again universally beloved. He had just had my favorite match of his against Gunther, where he won the Intercontinental title at WrestleMania.
Okay.
Were you familiar at all? Because this kind of jumped into the zeitgeist generally a little bit. The Bloodline stuff with Roman Reigns and Sami Zayn.
No.
So Sami Zayn, at like when it all first started, this thing went on for like a year. Sami Zayn was like on a losing streak. He was kind of a mid-low carder. So he decided, I want to get into the Bloodline, which is Roman Reigns. He's the main big bad guy, like been the champ for 5 years had been the champ for 5 years.
I have to ask, is he, because I don't watch or hadn't watched till this week, is he still a big thing?
He is a way bigger thing. He'd be unrecognizable to you.
Okay.
He's fucking awesome now.
Is he? Because I remember he sucked years
such
of
balls.
you complaining about him when I didn't watch it.
He sucked such balls. He cringeworthy when he would try to cut promos. Like John Cena cooked him one time in the ring, and I had to like turn stuff off. No, he rules now. He like got Paul Heyman, changed his whole character, and he rules. And then the Usos, Special Needs Jay.
Good time to get back into wrestling, I guess.
And they're all like The Rock was a part of it during this WrestleMania season because they're all family. All those Samoan people, like that Anoa'i families all together. Sammy decided, I love you guys. I want to be a part of your family. And like over the course of the year, he kind of ingratiated himself with at least one of the Usos, and then the other one, and they were like, and then Roman kind of said, okay, you can be part of it, but he was like very clearly gaslighting him the whole time, like kind of in deep storytelling for WWE. It's like the best storytelling they've done ever, I think, was this Bloodline story. And then, finally culminated with Sammy breaking free of the abusive relationship and like saving his friend Kevin Owens from Roman Reigns. But like, that was the Bloodline. Okay. It was like, went on for a year and a half and it was the biggest thing. Sammy from Montreal wrestled Roman for the belt and lost in Montreal, that sucked, but it was a great match, and Sami Zayn rules. Also, Sammy's been doing the Sammy for Syria thing, which it's like a roving charity where he like gets like hundreds of thousands of dollars for relief in Syria, because he's not, I don't know if he's Syrian, he's Middle Eastern.
Okay.
And that also, I now allow myself to watch the blood money fucking shows that they do. The WWE signed a deal for like $1 gazillion with Mohammed Bonesaw Man.
So like the golf stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sports washing. Yeah. And I never watched any of those shows, but once Sami Zayn started going, I'm like, okay, he knows better than I do. It's okay. I can watch these. Like, I trust him. So I watched the last one. It was actually really good. Lyra, my favorite, Lyra Valkyria, very specifically had to do the thing where she got announced, came down for her match, and then had to stand there like a fucking asshole. I always wonder what the people live, like, are they on their phones? Like, what are they doing? Are they watching the Titantron? Dave said, like, I'm going to go and double check, make sure my car's locked. Like, well, I got this time on my hands. Yeah, she had to sit there for forever before we get the Kairi Sane match, which fucking ruled. And this was where I was going to bring up the difference between American women's wrestling now and what we thought it was. It's people like Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega, who are in the conversation for actual best wrestler in the world. They maintain that Joshi, which is Japanese female wrestling, is the best wrestling on earth. Really? Yeah. And that's where a lot of this stuff that you're seeing now comes from. Like Sasha Banks, who's Mercedes Moné now, she jumped ship from WWE and is in AEW. She does a ton of Japanese stuff. She actually went to New Japan after she walked out on Vince for like a few months. I don't think that's going to register, hopefully. Again, stupid booking stuff. So, like, the women's tag team title match, the challengers, I looked up their, like, stats because I know them. They haven't won a match in, like, a year. And they got a title match. Like, there is no sports adjacency in WWE. Yeah. AEW tries to do a sports-based show. There's goofiness, obviously. But, like, you didn't fucking win for a year and you get a title shot. What is that? Why? That doesn't make any goddamn sense. It's that little stuff that aggravates me. What'd you think of Seth Rollins?
Who was that? You have to.
Guy with the stupid hat. Outfit. Yeah. That's actually a super toned down. He, for the last several years, was Seth freaking Rollins. They got rid of the freaking when he made his return this week, and he toned it down. He would wear you know that commercial with Gamora, the girl that plays Gamora, and she's got the big giant like marshmallow jacket, and she's like, I look ridiculous. Well, all of his shit looked like that.
So like Lady Gaga outfits.
He's like ridiculous, and not in a cool, stylish way. In a like what the fuck way. This was like the most stylish. Once he took off the Children of the Corn hat, he it was the best thing he had on. He's worn it. It was a little Captain Stubing from fucking like Love Boat or whatever, but like it was a big step up. He also his like promo he cut was a little bit better. He fucking sucks. The promo wasn't he's great in the ring. He's one of those guys. He's just great in the ring.
I literally don't have notes about him besides that he was dressed like Cruella de Vil, so that probably means that I wasn't super impressed.
No, because he does not make an impression when he talks. Are you aware that Cody Rhodes is the biggest?
You've told me that, so I was kind of waiting to see him.
Well, he's a SmackDown superstar.
Oh, he is. Okay, that's a big difference too, right? I think back when we watched, there wasn't like split rosters.
They did the brand split, like right as you were stopping watching. I hate it. I always say there can only be one world champ, but there's not. There's two. There's Damian Priest and Cody Rhodes. And what really fucking aggravates me is they started calling Cody's title the undisputed heavyweight title, which the definition of the word undisputed is that there's no dispute. Damian Priest disputes your claim. The only reason anybody knows undisputed as a word in as far as like this context is because Mike Tyson, when he first started boxing, there were like 10 world titles and he beat the shit out of all of them and combined them and became the undisputed champion. So like literally the opposite of the word is what they do.
So which roster do you prefer? In Raw?
Raw.
Okay.
My favorite guy, Kevin Owens, is on SmackDown, but I have a feeling that like Triple H doesn't do the writing or does not invest as much in SmackDown since the Netflix deal because everything kind of just sucks. Like it's all thrown together. It's not a bunch of like interweaving storylines like you see here. It's just a bunch of bullshit. There's good wrestling on it, but like it feels like the B show for sure. I
do want to say that Damian Priest, is that his name?
Yeah.
He should be the new movie trailer voice guy.
Yeah. That's why he's a star, because he's got a big, deep voice.
Great.
He's not a very good promo, but he's a good talker. Like he's good at backstage segments, and he's got that voice.
He is. He's just almost like conversational. It's not like I'm cutting a promo in the middle of the ring.
That's what you're looking for is conversational. Like that's the ideal for most wrestling companies. And it's really hard to be conversational in WWE because you're handed a script.
Even in the middle of the ring, it just felt like he was just talking.
Yeah, he's improved a shitload on the mic. But like he's always been a pretty good actor. I don't like him as a wrestler. I find him very boring. But yeah, he can do all that stuff, and he for sure should be like the movie phone guy.
Right. That was my first thought when I heard him talk.
He had a cool moment a couple of years ago. They went to Puerto Rico. They did a show in Puerto Rico where he's from, and he wrestled Bad Bunny. And Bad Bunny had like it was when he was at the very top of most streams.
Yeah.
Spotify. Like the pop for Bad Bunny was the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. But that was really the only thing Damian Priest has ever done that I give a shit about.
All right.
He's like watching paint dry, kind of. Karrion Kross was the dude that wrestled on the show. He has everything except the ability to wrestle. He's got the look, the charisma. He can act. He's like interesting, and he gets in the ring, and he looks like he's gonna fucking hurt somebody because he drops people all over the place. He's like not as bad as Nia Jax. Have you heard me doing my Nia Jax impersonations?
I don't think so.
Go back and listen to some recent Raw Blue Thunder pods. Nia Jax is like The Rock's cousin. She's a big fat lady. She's tall and fat. I don't dislike her because she's fat, because like Piper Niven is one of my favorite wrestlers. She's even fatter. Nia Jax can't wrestle at all, can't talk, and she is constantly at the top of the card because she's The Rock's cousin.
Right.
And she's the worst. She's like unsafe. She hurts people all the time and stuff. And she talks like this. And like she doesn't even like put her own spin on the script that she's been clearly handed right before she walks out. And she was former teammates with Tamina, who is famous murderer Jimmy Superfly Snuka's daughter. Tamina has been on the roster with Nia Jax for 12 years now.
Incidentally, Tamina, I was just having a conversation last night about how Jimmy Superfly Snuka is a murderer.
Killed his wife, yeah. And Vince bought his way out of it.
Covered it up, basically.
Tamina looks like she would, in her private life, like wear a black leather jacket out to try to meet like single guys, even though she's like getting up there, and her jacket would smell of cigarette smoke very heavily.
You're painting a good picture.
Oh, she's been my most hated wrestler for many, many years. Naya's getting close because she's just on my goddamn TV too much. But Tamina was nobody Mina. That was her fucking tagline. There's nobody Mina.
Come on.
Yeah. And then the main event sucked. It was Awesome Truth, which they were a joke. Like, they're a comedy tag team. It was cool that they won the titles at WrestleMania. They should have lost them the next day instead of like having this stupid joke go on for 8 weeks and then lose to the Judgment. I'm glad they lost to Finn Balor because I think it's going to lead into like some stuff.
Yeah.
With the ultimate breakup of them and Liv siding with or whatever. And it's going to be huge when Rhea Ripley comes back because she's the most popular woman. And when Roman comes back, because the bloodline, his current bloodline guys are trying to take over that's a SmackDown thing. But like Roman Reigns is super, super popular too. I may have to show you a couple clips of like what Roman is like now.
I think I'll have to catch up a little bit.
It is I'll just showing you his like entrance and stuff. You will be like, oh, that can't be the same guy.
Oh, I will say, I just got a tiny glimpse of him, but you kind of mentioned him at the beginning of the episode. But Gunther.
I meant to ask you about Gunther.
My thought on Gunther, my note says, who is this guy and why do I think I like him?
He's the fucking best wrestler in the company.
I got my Batista tingles a little bit.
He's the best wrestler in the company.
Okay.
He can talk. In ring, he's a big man who fucking brings it. Like, when I say the best wrestler in the company, I'm not exaggerating. Like, most people consider him to be the best wrestler on the WWE roster.
Yeah, which is funny because it must be like an aura because he didn't really do. But as soon as he came in the ring, I was like, I think I like this guy.
He carries himself with such an aura of confidence that like he was the Intercontinental Champion. He set the record. He was Intercontinental Champion for like 2 years or something.
Yeah, I got that.
Sami Zayn
I got that vibe.
Beat him. He was the unbeatable bad guy that Sami Zayn beat at WrestleMania. He's a future like world champion.
Got it.
Like he rules. He's one of the guys that like could go to AEW. He won't because I don't think they'll ever let him go because he's a huge part of their future. But like he's one of the guys that could go and actually wrestle in AEW. When like half the roster would not be able to do that without making a fool of himself.
Yeah, no, I was like, I had a genuine feeling of like, I like this guy, and I didn't even know anything about him.
I was going to do just one, but it's not going to take us any more time. I think I'm going to cut it here and do for the AEW too, just because it's an hour. It's a little over an hour, and I want to keep it like an hour 15 each.
Sure.
So I'll cut all this part, but I will not cut this part. So like in total, would you say you enjoyed Monday Night Raw?
I did. I definitely.
So you had a good time with it.
I did.
And it wasn't one of the best episodes.
No, and it made me want to watch again.
So that's a good sign.
The good and the bad thing about Raw is that to me it was the same. Like, I guess if I was watching all the time, maybe
without the rape vibes,
maybe that novelty would wear thin. But because I hadn't watched in so long, it was like picking up a bike and you just knew how to ride it. Like that was how Raw felt. It was just something that I knew. That's cool. And for somebody like me, the subtle changes that they are making are enough for me to not want to blow my brains out when I have to watch the shows and review them. And there's a bunch of people I like. The performers themselves I always enjoyed. Yeah, no, it was definitely enjoyable. I mean, it was like ridiculous in all the ways that it's ridiculous. But, I mean, I had a fun time with it, and I could definitely see like getting my kids into it with me because of that ridiculous nature of it. That's good to hear. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say about AEW Dynamite, my personal favorite wrestling program on earth. I lied to you guys. I said last week that we were going to do all these shows would be one shots, but I am going to split this one in two. We're going to end this pod right now, and then we'll do our AEW broadcast. Find out what Aaron thought of that, just to give it some symmetry.
So if you haven't, it's going to drop at the same time as this. If you haven't listened to the AEW podcast already, please go do so. You can find us Twitter at Blue Thunder Pod, YouTube, The Blue Thunder Pod, TikTok, Blue Thunder Pod, Instagram, Blue Thunder Pod, mail at bluethunderpod.com. Thank you for joining me, Aaron, even though we're not moving
been a genuine
1
pleasure.
inch. And check out the AEW podcast that we're about to record right now. Thanks for joining us, guys. See you next week. Bye.